All right, guys, happy freaking New Year, and let's go. Welcome in to Slaughterhouse Sports. We have an absolute ton to talk about. This is sometimes why you have a YouTube channel and why I love in this day and age that I can go on this camera here and speak into this microphone about what I'm witnessing in the great game of Colegio football. And that is what these times are for. There's some days where you have a ton to say. And yesterday was one of the most monumental days in recent college football history. And I'm going to, talk about the two biggest games that we saw yesterday. But I'd be remiss if I did not give my prayers to the ones that have been tragically killed in New Orleans in a terrorist attack on Bourbon Street at 3 o'clock. Senseless, horrible, horrific evil. And my prayers are with those people, with the fallen and their families. And it's just terrible to say that. So, again, there's some things that are a lot more important than football. And, of course, the Sugar Bowl got postponed, and it was the right decision. So, With all of that being said, it's tough to transition, but we're going to talk about Oregon, and we're going to talk now about the Oregon Ducks and the Ohio State Buckeyes. And a great part of football is that as heated as you can get over a game, it doesn't, again, in the hierarchy of life, that's why football is fun to talk about and complain about, because things matter more than the game does, but the game matters a lot. So, anyway, let's get to talking about the football on the field. Ohio State goes out and absolutely blasts Oregon yesterday. Jeremiah Smith had 2 touchdowns in the game. The guy 6'3". I don't know how he weighs that much. I don't know how he runs that fast as an 18-year-old. I don't know how his body is that developed, where literally, and it's not just one fringe person saying this. There's people saying that he would be the first pick in the NFL draft as an 18-year-old, which I don't know if he's better than Travis Hunter or if he's better than Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell and Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. He probably is a first-round talent at this age because he is one of the better receivers. He's better than Emeka Egbuka on his own team. He was better than Tez Johnson. And really, Will Howard's been outstanding in these 2 playoff games. But really, the college football regular season, guys, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't really matter like it used to matter. Oregon beat Ohio State 33-31 during the regular season. That game was played in, I believe, October at Autzen Stadium to a packed-out Oregon crowd. Dylan Gabriel was able to, hit Trayshawn Holden. He was able to hit Evan Stewart a lot. And really, Evan Stewart has been a disappointment from the transfer portal. He's been injured, which, again, is unfortunate. But still, when he's been available, this is a 5-star Texas A&M transfer, a highly touted transfer, and Evan Stewart has been a massive disappointment. That's been a massive storyline. The Oregon players have massively disappointed. Evan Stewart has disappointed. Jordan James got injured. Mateo Uiagalelei, who's a sophomore, he needed to make a bigger impact in the game than Jack Sawyer and JTT on Ohio State. The Oregon defensive line, Elijah Rushing's a 5-star, Blake Purchase, Mateo U, I believe even Jordan Birch has been injured the entire year. Your best players on that defensive line are Derek Harmon. So Tony Toyoti's kid's even one of the better players on that team. Like, Oregon is still relying on, Betcher being one of their best defensive players. And God bless Betcher, but he is a walk-on. So the development with Tony Toyoti and the defensive line can honestly get better. The schemes, the blitzing schemes from Tosh Lapoy and Oregon's defense against the best teams that they've played this year. When we go back to Boise State, Boise hung 31 on them. When we go back to the Penn State game in the Big Ten Championship, they rushed for 295 yards, which is just unacceptable to allow 300 rushing yards. And this Oregon team is a disconnected football team. Like, Dan Lanning talks about how they're connected. This team is not really playing together as a defensive unit. You don't see the passion. You don't see the physicality. The fact that I think Stewart went out of the game yesterday and got hurt during warmups is a massively undercovered story, because he's one of your best receivers. That's like A.J. Brown on the Eagles going down. I mean, he's one of your best weapons, and he's hurt, and then he's good enough to warm up, and then he doesn't even play. Like, that's a gut punch to the nth degree. But the regular season, guys, it doesn't freaking matter. Oregon beat Ohio State in the regular season. Ohio State barely beat the 6-6 Nebraska Cornhuskers in the shoe this year. Oregon lost to a team that literally doesn't have a quarterback, and it was a home game. Ohio State did, the last game of the year. And then Oregon the following week, while Ohio State sat on their ass and ate cheese curls, they went to Lucas Oil Stadium and they freaking battled. And I know their defense was terrible, like I alluded to, but they put their blood, sweat, and tears to win that Big Ten championship. And heck, that meant a lot. First year in the conference, you go undefeated in the regular season. Like, Oregon could have lost at Wisconsin, like at Camp Randall. Like, that's a tough place to play. Oregon won that game. Oregon blew out Illinois at home. Oregon went to Michigan at Michigan and beat Michigan. But now everyone's only going to care about the result of them getting blasted in the Rose Bowl in the middle of, what is it? It's January. It's the following year. You can go 13 games and be great, and if you lose the 14th game, your season's not only a failure at Oregon, but you're not even close to winning a national championship in this new, elongated, screwed-up format. It's a screwed-up deal. Let's look at the college football playoff. SMU, who didn't win their conference, they got their doors blown off. Okay, in that game. Indiana, who plays in the Big Ten as well, went to Notre Dame. They gave us a horrible product. That's the coach of the year, by the way. So, and then Clemson, Texas, that wasn't that good of a game, and neither was Ohio State versus Tennessee. So, you're having these 18 to 21-year-old kids, have to play all of these games. And Ohio State, by them not going to Indianapolis, they look better because they didn't go to Indianapolis. It was an advantage for them to win this national championship, for them not to play in the Big Ten championship. It was an advantage to lose to Michigan. And that game in the middle of the year with Oregon, because of the expanded conferences, you're getting playoff rematches in the damn regular season. So your exposure to them isn't as fun. It isn't as great. So Oregon, for beating Ohio State and peaking during October, it didn't go as well. Maybe Oregon should have lost to Wisconsin so they could have sat at home and watched Ohio State play Penn State And then maybe Oregon, again, could have gotten further in this format. But again, I love winning a Big Ten championship. Like, those guys are still going to have rings on their fingers, all right? The offense, like, there's great players that are still on this team. Savage is a really good player. Betcher, for what I said, is a really good player. Ferguson is an awesome player. Like, offensively, Jordan James, Connerly is a real talent, even though he had a tough game yesterday in some regards. Will Stein is a good play caller. It's just that Oregon, they didn't play their best game yesterday, but Ohio State is just that much better. And when Ohio State clicks, like, it is over. It's interesting to me how the Oregon running backs Coach Lachlan, wanted to leave Dan Lanning's staff to be a part of Ryan Day's staff. Like, I don't know if he got a pay upgrade, or I don't know if there's something with Ohio State where their culture is that much more desirable to a tough guy like Coach Lachlan. Maybe it's being with Day and Brian Hartline and different influences and being closer to Memphis. It might just be that. But this Oregon team, it was led by Dillon Gabriel. I know Evan Stewart, I know that he had, bringing in Evan Stewart, there was questions about how he'd fit into the locker room and everything. And I think for the most part, it was good at Oregon. But this team was a lot more consistent, though, a year ago. With Bo Nix, with Bucky, with Troy Franklin. This football team, and they did play in the Pac-12. It could have been a lot of factors that led into Oregon getting blasted. Because 34-0, guys, that isn't just you have an off day. It isn't like you're a field goal kicker and you miss a couple of field goals. It isn't like, we dropped a couple of passes or fumbled the ball. No, Dillon Gabriel got sacked 8 more times in that game than he did at Autzen Stadium. There's something unbelievably wrong with that result. Like, if you spin the dice, all right, the roulette table, that result of being down 34-0, the odds of that happening, this was a pick-em before the game. And Oregon beat Ohio State in the regular season and had massive success on offense. I think Evan Stewart being out of that game was massive. He was great in the first game. I think that there's something that happened with this defense towards the end of the season. I think that just this team started to deteriorate late. Like, maybe the Idaho games, Boise State and Idaho, I think that the travel really affected Oregon. Looking back on it, the travel affected them. The Big Ten championship, going out there and winning it, It took a toll because these guys were just gassed. They didn't have anything left, and Ohio State somehow handled the long season a lot better than Oregon did. The way Oregon handled the bye weeks, the calendar, this is a different world for a 38-year-old coach. Like, Ryan Day still has a lot more years of coaching experience over Dan Lanning. He's about 8 years older. Chip Kelly's older. Jim Knowles is older. Tosh Lapoy and Chris Hampton and Rashid Samples and Will Stein, this is a young staff that I believe is going to get better. And Oregon is going to eventually figure out how to maneuver their way through this college football playoff. And unfortunately for Oregon, it sounds incredibly, I hate to say this because I love competing in every game, but really Penn State losing to Oregon, Penn State had a better chance of winning a national championship than Oregon, which is just so unbelievably dumb. So I wish that this format could go and have 8 teams maximum in these college football playoffs. And if Ohio State losing to Michigan meant that they were out of the damn playoffs, I'd be okay with it. The conference championship games have to mean more in this format. You could maybe have Clemson and Arizona State because we saw Arizona State, and if you win your conference championship and you're on a real heater like Arizona State belonged and Clemson was playing good ball towards the end of the year as well. Notre Dame is a very worthy team. Boise lost to Oregon. Boise had a decent year, but again, like, Boise was still, their margin of victories was still not even that great. It's tough because Indiana is maybe more deserving than Ohio State. If we were to talk about the season, but actually Ohio State beat the doors off of Indiana. So in fact, Ohio State might get in because of the head-to-head. So in a perfect world, we'd have like Clemson, Arizona State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. Unfortunately for Tennessee, they'd be out. We'd have a lot of Big Ten flavor, and that's what would go on. And maybe we could have had maybe Ohio State and Tennessee play. Maybe you can have like one play-in game to get into the quarterfinals. And that would be that. And then you'd have the games on campus. Because how dumb is it too? Like, the fact that like we're raining down confetti in a semifinal game like in Atlanta, or how come the Sugar Bowl and these bowl games, like they said they're meaningless before, but now these great bowl games, the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, are relegated to quarterfinal matchups. So in the post game, the fans don't even enjoy it. Like, the fans pay all that money, they go out to LA, and then in the post game, it's like, oh, well, you're playing in a week against Texas. So what do you guys think about that? So great win, great job, but what do you think about the next two games that you got to play? Like, no one even enjoys winning in the college football playoff because it's so massively long. So the regular season, like the Ohio State loss to Michigan, it ended up for Ohio State that they got an extra week of rest and they played possum that they didn't know how to utilize their wide receivers. You know, that's essentially what happened in the season. All right, and Oregon had a wonderful year, but now people are going to remember them for this game. Where I'm going to remember Oregon as having a phenomenal season, and if they go undefeated in the season, that should be absolutely celebrated. So, you know, that's my thoughts on the game. I think Ohio State's a lot more talented than Oregon ended up being, but Oregon also didn't really structure the season the way that they needed to in order to adjust to this incredibly changing new world of this college football playoff. And Ohio State is playing their best football at this time, where the game shouldn't have been as lopsided as it was. There's something mentally that is wrong with Oregon football. I'm not sure that their culture is as strong as it needs to be. Are they taking in talent and not going for culture? They're not really retaining. They're relying too much on these transfers. These high school players have to start, especially in the secondary, you need to start identifying cornerbacks that you can play as freshmen and sophomores. And the secondary cannot just be all transfer portal 1 year guys. And that's that.